That's a story of betrayal. For example, maybe in one of your relatively uninformed flurries, you ended up establishing a relationship with someone who was really not good for you. And that might mean, well, it was just a bad personality match. Or it might mean they really weren't good for you because, you could get pretty unlucky and you can get tangled up with someone who's very deceitful and very malevolent and who could care less about you, or maybe who even wants to hurt you. And then you can establish a trusting relationship with them, or at least you trust them. And then one day, you find out that they are not who they said they were, or even more importantly, they are not who you thought they were. And so then maybe you're in a committed relationship and they betray you with someone else. And so then you think, well, there you are at home, and you're perfectly happy about being at home, and then your partner comes home, and for one reason or another, you find out that they're having an affair, or that they've betrayed you. Or that they've lied to you in some other spectacularly important way. And maybe it's a lover, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a sibling, and maybe it's a friend. Whatever. It doesn't matter. And so here's the way of thinking about it. The minute before they come home, you're in one place. And you remember, a place isn't just a place, right? A place is a place in time. Because we live in space-time. We live in time and place. And what that means is you can be in the same place in 1 minute and a completely different place in the next minute, even if you haven't even moved. And so place is a very, very complicated idea. So you're sitting at home and you're watching Oprah, and you're perfectly content to do that, and then the person comes home and the bottom of your world falls out. And then all of a sudden you're not where you thought you were. And it's a really weird place that you are now, because it's not where you were, that's for sure. But you also don't know where it is, because you don't know who that person is that's in that room with you. You don't know what your past with them was, or what it meant, or anything else about it, because it was predicated on absolute misperceptions. So none of your memories about those events are valid, even though you have them as memories. And then you have a worse problem, which is if you're betrayed badly enough, not only are you not going to understand your immediate past with that person, oh, and by the way, your future's also gone, so that's a big problem, as is your present has become radically more complex. But it's worse than that, because if you're really betrayed, you're also going to think, who am I that I could be that stupid? And then you're going to think, what is a human being that they can be that corrupt? And so not only have the fundamentals been kicked out of the substructure of your perceptions, but your notion of what it means to be you and what it means to be human might have been seriously disrupted. And the thing about that is that's a non-trivial event. People call that traumatic. It's like a physical wound. In fact, it certainly, if the trauma is great enough, it can produce a psychophysiological wound, because that sort of trauma, a deep betrayal is a good example, will damage your brain. And maybe you'll recover from it, and maybe you won't. And one of the ways that's been represented forever in mythological stories is by being swallowed up by a subterranean beast. It's something that comes up from the depths and pulls you down, and then you're in it. Now, why is that? Well, that's an extraordinarily complicated question, but here's the answer as nearly as I can tell. We evolved a very complicated neuropsychological system to signal alarm. So that's anxiety, threat sensitivity, right? And that makes us freeze, for example. And when you look at how an animal uses that system, let's say a mammal, just to keep it simple, because we're all mammals, and so we can kind of understand mammals. So if a rabbit sees a wolf, for example, it's going to freeze, so that the wolf can't see it. And if a rat smells a cat, even if it has never smelled a cat in its whole life, it's going to also freeze. And interestingly, with rats, if you put rats in a natural environment, which means they get to have little rat dominance hierarchies, little rat families, and they're not like little white rats alone in a cage. They're happy family rats. And they've got their burrows and they live in their little societies, and maybe there's a part of their territory where they can go get food. And they're used to that, so they'll scurry out there in the day, kind of hiding because they don't like light, or maybe they'll scurry out at night because rats are night things. And they'll get their food and they'll eat it or bring it back, or whatever they do, share it with their family, or at least bring it back. Well, let's say that you put a cat out there, or maybe you even just put a cat there and take it away so that the place smells like cat. Well, if one of those rats goes out there and sees that cat, first of all, it's going to freeze, and it is not a happy thing. Because imagine, you're a rat, and a thing that's 4 times as big as a lion suddenly appears on your front yard. It's like, that's rough, man. You're going to freeze, and then you're going to go hide downstairs, and what are you going to do? Well, if you're a rat, you're going to scream for 24 hours, which is non-stop with your little beak poking out of your burrow so everyone can hear you scream. And that's the same, given the length of a rat's life, as you screaming non-stop for 2 weeks. So like, that rat's nervous. It's not happy about the whole cat thing. And then maybe, if no more cat odor happens by and no hyper-vigilant rats see any more cats, then after it screams for 2 weeks, it starts to calm down a little bit, and maybe then it starts to remember that it's hungry and that there's things to attend to, and so then maybe it very, very carefully goes back out where it was foraging for food, sort of crouched over and hyper-vigilant and not moving very much in case that damn cat's around, and then maybe slowly it regains control over its territory. It runs back and forth, trying to ensure that none of that place that used to be safe has got troublesome cats associated with it anymore. And so in some sense, the bottom fell out of that rat's life. Now, the thing is, the rat has predator detection systems that are associated with extreme anxiety and escape that are automatically activated whenever there's a predator in sight. And we have those systems too. But human beings are, you might say, well, okay, rats have predators, enemies. Humans have predators, enemies. Okay, so then we might say, well, what's a human predator/enemy? Well, it depends on how long a period of time over which you wish to calculate what constitutes human. Because we know, for example, that 60 million years ago, your primary predator, when you were wandering around in trees, and were only about this big, was snakes. And so snake is a predator and an enemy. And you guys can easily learn how to be afraid of snakes, and maybe you're innately afraid of them to begin with. The science on that is not exactly clear, although it certainly indicates that you could easily learn snake fear, and it probably indicates that really it's innate. It's innate in chimpanzees, so why not in us? It's not that long since we split off the evolutionary pathway from the common chimp-human ancestor. So enemies, snakes, what else? How about crocodiles? Those things pulled a lot of your ancestors, well, not your ancestors because they got pulled underwater, but when we were wandering around on the African veldt and we went down to the river to have some water, you can be sure that a fair number of us got pulled underneath by crocodiles. And so crocodiles, and those are creepy things, crocodiles. I mean, they figure in nightmares and they figure in horror movies, and you can imagine yourself in Florida out there with the alligators and thinking, it'd be just as well if they didn't come too close to your boat with their little beady eyes and their great big teeth. And, they're unpleasant things. And then there's lions, hyenas. Okay, and what are those things? You might think a lion and a hyena are different things, but they're not, I would say. They're large-toothed mammalian carnivores. It's like a meta-category. And so they sort of fit in that predator-enemy category. And your nervous system is prepared to respond to predatory eyes and teeth. And no wonder, because predatory eyes track you down and teeth eat you, and they bite you. And so it's a good thing that you're aware of those and that you can detect them rapidly.